On this episode of A State of Control, we talk about what is the future of user interface design when it comes to leveraging web technologies. We also get into a little bit of debate on the modern approaches to software development and proprietary approaches. All that and more on A State of Control.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
A State of Control.
A State of Control, episode 69, HTML5. Are we there yet?
Support for AVNation is brought to you by
Extron, industry-leading technology backed by world-class support.
Welcome to A State of Control, an AVNation podcast that highlights the control, programming, and automation aspects of the audiovisual industry. My name is Steve Greenblatt. I'm your host. Thanks for joining us today. So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the future of user interface design and when it comes to looking at emerging web technologies and where things are headed. So with me to discuss that, we actually have the opportunity to speak with two people from outside of the U.S. But before we get to introducing them, I'd like to say hi to my partner here at State of Control. He's none other than Rich Fregosa. How are you, Rich?
I'm doing good, mellow Uncle Richie. West Coast greetings in confinement. So, yeah, at least virtual. I was telling the guys earlier. I said, as a programmer, I think we've been all training our lives for this moment. So, isolation, I guess, makes for comfort here.
Absolutely. So, I'd like to welcome two returning guests. First one is Patrick Murray. He is from Catch Connect, and he comes to us from Germany. How are you, Patrick?
Doing great here, Steve. Dealing with the quarantine. The worst that's happened to us is extra bored children. So I think we're doing okay. If that's all we have to deal with.
So not extra children, just extra bored.
Just extra bored.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a challenge.
And last but not least, we got to meet in person for the first time at ISE, which was probably one of the last times I've actually been in person with some people. And he's none other than Oliver Hall from Ultimation. How are you, Oliver?
Really good, thanks.
Thanks for joining us again.
Cheers.
So in past episodes, we've talked a lot about the components of a user interface design. We talked a bit about user experience. And today we're going to talk more about the technologies behind it. You know, what does it take to create these user interfaces and the user experience? And we're going to get into where things are headed and how they apply to the AV industry with regard to leveraging tools and different web technologies. So, Rich, why don't we start the conversation just by talking about what's going to change in the AV world when we start to introduce some other technologies beyond the proprietary software that we're used to dealing with when it comes to developing our user interfaces?
Well, my first hope is that we'll be able to better meet client expectations. We've said this many times that we're unfortunately a little bit behind the curve in that the technology advancements that you see just in the greater computer and IT world is that we're going to be following behind Android and Apple and the styles and the interface methods that they're going to push out. I mean, we don't have the luxury of pushing out 10 million devices at once and having it adopted. An example that we saw, for the longest time was everybody loves skeuomorphic design, which was, the photorealistic. And then one day out of nowhere, flat design was arranged. And overnight, the expectation was to follow that lead. However, in our industry, we had just gotten a skeuomorphic. We were happy to have that stuff. And all of a sudden now we're looking outdated and pushing through. So my hope is that as these tools come closer to what the general programming community uses, we'll be able to leverage those tools a little bit better and develop faster, develop, be able to turn things around quicker, and also make changes faster. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Is it's you know, in the bespoke environment, and Ollie can say the same thing. I mean, that is a completely different animal. You're creating, you know, not to overuse the term, but I mean, that's your artistry that comes into play. That's something personalized, you know, it's tailored. But when you're pushing out huddle spaces or conference rooms or distance learning classrooms, or, you know, what we're going to see, we were talking about it on another show the other day, is when you start talking about the high performance home office, you're going to need to be a lot more agile. And in order to be agile, you need tools that not only allow you to move quickly, but also to get access to a larger resource pool. And, you know, that you know, my hope too is that it makes it a little bit more collaborative. So, you know, I view it as a good thing. We've been waiting for it forever. We keep talking about it, and we're starting to kind of crest that bridge at this point.
So Patrick, Rich talked a lot about the different benefits that we're going to find, and the kind of the why behind some of this, and where we're going to benefit. But in making, is this going to be a very easy transition? Is this going to be something that we're just going to look at we've opened the door, and now here's our hallway, and we're going to find, you know, the destination? Or are we going to run into some challenges in making a transition to, I guess, not only modernizing the user interface, but developing with some more modernized tools?
No, it won't be easy. I really believe that it will change. If there's some decent adoption of doing things this way, I think it will change the way that projects are done. Because in the past, right, Rich kind of alluded to this, we didn't have this scale. We weren't putting out 10,000 devices. We're doing a handful of rooms. So we didn't have the scale to really create robust frameworks that could handle anything. So we needed really simple tools where you could send a tech to site and they could drag a button around the screen or quickly change the color. And we did that by using a pixel perfect environment. You had to know the screen size, and it was very rigid, but you could make quick changes on the spot. And we won't be able to do that anymore when you're adopting these modern software languages using HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Just changing a color can be a huge hassle. It's hunting down where in that CSS code you have to change the hex code to make it red instead of blue. That's not the kind of thing you want to be doing when you're on a job site, sitting on a cable spool at 10 o'clock at night. So consultants, engineers, you know, we all need to plan for this in how the project is run. The UI needs to be done before everything is deployed, and don't expect to make quick changes. Iterative changes can be done off-site in a planned manner, but quick changes on-site, I think, is going to be the biggest wake-up call to adopting technologies like this.
So Oliver, bring you into this conversation, and Rich touched also on the fact that we're opening the door to other resources and other talent, and having being able to tap into the capabilities of people outside of our industry. Let's say, are we going to start to see clients or other types of trades, whether it's a web developer or a graphic designer or somebody of that ilk, developing user interfaces that we're going to have to use now that they you know, we've almost opened the door to these possibilities, and it's something that they are going to look at and say, oh, I'm used to doing this stuff.
This is one of the things that gets kind of suggested quite a lot, isn't it? That there's suddenly going to be, I don't know whether it's you know, paranoid programmers worrying that their jobs are all going to suddenly evaporate overnight, but there's a lot of talk about whether there's going to be a sort of an influx of people with, you know, web user interface development skills that's suddenly going to come along and do it. I'm not quite sure that it's going to work like that. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a tool, and you can have different people, you know, apply that tool in different ways. I'm not sure that web developers are naturally going to suddenly move away from the web development kind of communities that they're within and suddenly think that AV is the place they want to be. Not just because, sort of the financial side of it or anything like that. I don't know. We did a thing when we were with you at IIC. We were taking a set of students around, and they were computer science students, and they were going around looking at the AV industry. And fair enough, it was an environment that they weren't really aware of. So it was good from that point of view that it opened their eyes. But I didn't get the feeling that they were suddenly sort of wowed by this whole sort of new industry that they hadn't sort of seen before. And I think that probably the same is true for web developers. You might go to a web developer and say, "I've got this, there's a new opportunity here doing AV development." I'm not sure that they're necessarily suddenly going to bite your hand off and jump at it. So I don't see a huge sort of big pool of resource suddenly sort of blooming from this kind of thing.
Mind if I jump in there, Steve?
Yeah.
Go for it.
I've actually have done this before, outsourced UI development to web developers. And there's a learning curve there, right? But there's if that happens in that kind of environment, I see the web developer making the HTML stuff and then the AV programmer editing it to put in his handles and hooks to go into the control system so that when you push a button, the control system knows about it, and the AV programmer will still do his normal automation logic. That's how I see things playing out. But to what Oliver was saying, I don't think there'll be that incoming interest, but I think outgoing, when an integrator or a consultant wants to make a different looking UI and wants to pull on that kind of resources, they could find a freelance developer or a consulting house who specializes in high-end user interfaces and use that as a resource. But that is a learning curve. The first time you do that, you'll probably fall on your face. I know that I did, because that communication is new. It's a new way of communicating with people. It's new for them. It's new for us. But eventually I found a few guys who we've developed a relationship with, and things work out really well in that case.
I think you've hit on something important there, that there's definitely a difference between mobile web development, or the kind of things that traditionally, if you go on the internet now and look these kind of things up, the kind of work that people are currently doing, it's not a straight kind of cut and paste into the AV world of
not at all
interface design. It's a very different paradigm, and in some ways I think some of the work that's being done now by some of the manufacturers on their new technologies is it shows some of that thinking coming through in a way that they're looking at it as though it's a mobile app, and it's kind of like, it's not a mobile app, it's an AV control system, and they'll converge anyway, like most of these things do. But there's definitely a different mindset involved in building this stuff.
Well, even the underlying technology HTML comes from the printed document. So a lot of those concepts come from a printed document with rows and columns. So just adopting that will be new to us, coming from Pixel Perfect, where we say X, Y coordinates, and now working in rows and columns. That's just the layout alone. But I saw it once, just explaining to a web developer, I want this bottom menu to stay on the bottom of the screen and never move, and I want nothing to scroll. It was a 10-minute conversation before he understood that.
And I think the thing that you mentioned before, Patrick, about the planning side of it as well, and not being able to make kind of on the hoof kind of changes and things, that's going to be a mountain to climb in terms of setting people's expectations, not just clients in residential and stuff like that, because they're always sort of saying, look, we just have this little change,
yeah.
But on commercial stuff as well, the number of jobs that we are sort of involved with, that people just don't think ahead. They don't do that. We go back to clients and say, can you do some wireframes for how do you want the UI to functionally, how do you want it to operate? And they kind of look at you blankly and think, what do you mean? It amazes me sometimes that people don't go through that process.
Steve,
and they're going to have to.
Yeah. Steve and I have had a few conversations about this, and I believe that a new role might be created called AV software consulting. Because what I see here in Germany, I don't know where it is in other places, consultants don't really plan the control system. They give you everything you need to make a functioning system. But like you said, the wiring, the framework, the layout, what buttons are going to go where, the actual functionality, many of them have told me, we don't know what the customer is going to need in the end. So we just make sure you have everything you need, and then we let the smart people do it. I expect those smart people to get involved earlier in the project if things are to go smoothly.
I mean, my takeaway from that, and I agree with you, and I think it's been that way for quite some time, is that we're going to have to be more diligent about planning, but I think also we're going to have to educate the world a little bit about what is going to be involved here, because with things, when we start to talk in terms that everybody thinks that they know about, it makes it sound like it's so easy, but they don't. But there I think that there's always going to be a differentiator between developing a user interface for something, any other component, and developing it for an AV system, and that's really where the education is going to have to be. And to Patrick's point, if we're looking at if we are able to architect a solution and then break it down into pieces, then you can assign somebody who's a specialist in a certain area to develop their part of it, I would imagine.
But we need to break away from the sort of mindset of traditional web development as well, where I think there is an expectation that you're building it once, and hopefully millions of people are going to use your output. With AV systems programming, it's not the same. You're building something that a handful of people might be using. You can't necessarily put the same sort of level or degree of resource into building some of these things that traditional web sort of paradigms can enjoy.
Well, I think we also want to consider, again, as it relates to our industry, and it's something that I started falling into by accident, is that we need to look a little closer at some of the affiliated industries. Like, there's digital signage content providers. They don't do anything on the technical side, but, I can guarantee that when you walk into Subway, the franchise owner who has the digital signage behind them didn't create all of that content behind them for the menu board. However, that was provided and was put together. When you walk into a gym, I mean, we're seeing that already. We're just not necessarily focusing on it because it's sort of kind of outside of AV, but where we've looked at it, as we said, absolutely, that is, that's like our first cousin. These kiosks that are there, they're performing the same function. Ordering functions, environment, hospitality, concierge services, all of these things. There are industries and companies that are already formed out there. And so as opposed to, and this is where companies are going to differentiate themselves with this change. This is, where that the differentiation that we keep talking about. If your company is going to grow, if you're going to differentiate yourself, your model will change. You have to look at, are we a content provider now? Do we have an in-house UX expert, or do we partner? And do we work with web developers? And I think what Oliver was saying was absolutely correct. I don't see that people who are interested in tech are going to look at AV and go, wow, AV is a place to be. It's not going to be employees coming in who want jobs that are taking jobs from existing AV programmers and techs. It's the opposite. It should be, and again, speaking as a business owner, it should be the third-party programming companies, the integrators with programming staff, all of these different types of companies, whether you're a large company, a small company, a mom and pop. It's constantly the business decision, which is, what can we do well in-house, and what can we do from a partnership standpoint? Like Pat was saying, can we relay information well enough to then be able to get a product that comes back? Now, the question then becomes with your client, is that a front-facing solution or is that a back-end solution? And again, like I said, I take it from the digital signage side of things. When I looked at it, I was like, there's people out there who are already creating how to deal with multimedia effects, how to deal with information, things that are transitioning, and there are already artists in place. So why would I try to reinvent the wheel or necessarily go out and grab a web developer and write a framework and all these things when I can call 6 digital signage content developers and say, hey, I've got an idea, and now I've got some of these tools. I'd like to take something that you did for brand XYZ and modify it for tablet use, computer use, et cetera. So, I mean, again, that's where my mind went with it, which is there's ways to maximize your profitability without the stubbornness of programmers of saying, I've got to do it all on my own. I have to control the process. It's a product. It's content. And once you take that content, you can send it out to a client. Because again, this goes back to the spec side as programmers, right? What do we always have problems with? Sign off. Send the framework. Send the darn framework. Send the mock-up, everything else. Just because nothing's happening when you press the button doesn't matter. But where you're going to get that pushback is, well, can it slide from the left to the right? Oh, I don't like Patrick was saying, I don't like this version of Ruby red. Can you make it, my Pantone red that I've set you? I mean, there's some exciting stuff to be able to use these tools. The ability to take their custom Pantone color scheme and drop that in. Well, now you've used it for client A. You go to client B and your framework is the same. You just ask them for the Pantone scheme that's already been vetted by the marketing companies and the brand imaging companies they've spent tons of money on. And you just integrate it and you go, no problem. Whereas opposed to the prior closed tools, I can guarantee I've sat there with an RGB picker guessing and guessing and guessing and going, nope.
There are conversion tools and things like that. Got to guess.
And you were the one who had to do it. So I think one of the potential benefits that kind of ties into what Oliver and Rich were saying is that the user interface gets decoupled from the rest of the system if everything is planned well. So in the past, you had to call the programmer if you wanted a change on the UI. In this respect, the UI can really be something that lives completely on its own, separate from the control logic and the rest of the system. And I've heard of this happening in campuses where they have web developers in-house who know the students, they know the staff, they know their branding and everything like that. And they develop the UIs and hook into an API, right? And all they need to do is send the right messages or receive the right messages. And the control system programmer doesn't need to know. So they could roll out an entire new UI next semester, and none of the control logic needs to be changed because everything is so well defined and completely decoupled. Now, you need to do this in a very standardized and planned out way. And that's what you were talking about, Oliver, is the changes. How are we going to handle that? And there are tools, to do this.
But hopefully, all of this is going to bring us towards the best practices that. Exactly. And this is one of the good things, that these things have been already worked out.
It's already figured out.
Yeah, by the traditional IT kind of development software sort of community.
Absolutely. We use GitLab for all of our projects here, and just the issue management, assigning tasks, describing issues, having all of the conversations documented and in one place, so you could jump around and don't have to go through emails and figure out who said what when. Just having issues on a board and being able to drag it from to do to doing to done, so that everybody at a glance knows what the state of the project is. It's really
powerful. There's loads of really good tools like that. A lot of people use Jira, don't they? We use Fogbugs, things like that. Though, those issues or case tracking tools, they're amazing when you start using them.
Yeah, when I show them to integrators, the techs at least are always like, "This is great. Why don't we do this for every project?"
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're trying to get other people that we work with to sort of sign up to those things as well, because it makes our lives easier as well. Because I'm sick of that kind of email trail of, can we do this? Can we do that? And then it gets lost and it gets sent to 3-4 different people. It's impossible.
Or renaming.
Can I go back to something that Rich mentioned? Sorry, I'm pointing at my picture of Rich over here earlier on, but I think you made a really good point about the sort of the transfer of skills, and it might not be that people come into the AV industry to become, to take their kind of web development careers to the next level. But I certainly think that one of the challenges we've had in employing people has been, when you write the job specification for somebody, and you say you'll be doing blah, 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 user interface development using tools such as, it might not say this literally, but effectively what you're saying is you're using VT Pro, you're using proprietary tools, you're using simple Windows, that kind of stuff. The change now that we can say, because we're on the Crestron side, you can use C#, and now that we can say you can use HTML and CSS and so on, that's going to make a massive difference for us, I think, in terms of being an attractive employer. Because even if, obviously as an employer, we're hoping that we'll take somebody on and keep them, but it's nice for them to be able to come to us and know that they're going to be building up transferable skills that can take them on somewhere else if that's where they want to go. So I hope that's going to make our lives easier in terms of finding new talent as well.
Do you mind if I ask a question, Steve? Steal the show a little. So why, I mean, these technologies have been available for years. All of them. Everything has been there to do this already. What's changed? Why is it taking so long? We've been deploying with Android tablets, running a touch panel, you press a button, it just works.
I mean, is there any one manufacturer in particular, or I mean, is that what you mean? Or
so when we need a touch panel, we take a Mimo touch panel. They're a couple $100, and it looks just like a touch panel, smells like a touch panel, acts like one, except it's running a web browser in kiosk mode.
But if I'm trying to put myself in this sort of space of one of the manufacturers, you know, a Crestron or an AMX or something, that's not their business model really, is it, I suppose? And for them to develop a panel that is, you know, a branded panel, it's the aircraft carrier that you can't.
So so the manufacturers drive the market, they drive the technology that's used. I always thought it was the integrator's job to pick the right tool for the job.
Sorry, I'm only looking at it from our point of view. I mean, we are affiliated with Crestron very much so. So, you know, I mean, we're tied into their ecosystem. We don't have the luxury of being able to just go out and pick things off the shelf, I guess.
I've always viewed it as replication. I mean, again, it's not when you deploy a project. It's not when a project's going well. My concern is, and I've told this to, you know, new programmers and new integrators. I said, I'm not worried about the profitability of your job today. I'm worried about the profitability of your job 5 years from now. I want to make sure 5 years from now that you've maintained the profitability of your job, that you actually made money on it over the life of the project. And, you know, I've gone back with them, like, let's go back on a project you did 2 years ago. I said, let's bring up all your service calls. Let's bring up the devices that you had to replace on your dime or things that you didn't think about. I said, now let's actually run the real numbers. I said, you paid for the privilege of working for this person. So, you know, there is, and this is the difference between bespoke and a solution that is being custom tailored and hopefully grows out and maybe to a customer base of 1,000 or in the single thousands. And then there's the question of, you know, enterprise and scale. And I think that the bigger question always is scale, you know, and we've always said that the AV industry has always been, you know, about a decade behind the curve. I mean, it used to be 20 years behind the curve easily. You know, I think we've started to close that gap. But there's lots of legacy systems still out there. There's projects you have to maintain that I know I have projects that are going on 23 years, you know, that there's still things that I have to maintain that were put in the 90s. So to be able to say, hey, absolutely, this is the brand new thing that I've got and this is software, that's great. And that's a forward thinking plan. But, you know, at the same time, it becomes a matter of, for integrators, new integrators, for techs, training. How many times do you have to cross-train for 4 different things? You know, if you've got a product, you've got training. You know, say you've got a one-off device. Where's the training classes for it? Do you have in-play, you know, do you have webinars? Do you have classrooms? Do you have demo facilities? Do you have all of these things? So, you know, it's a much bigger, to answer your question, it's more than just that piece of software running in that moment. It is the much larger organism over the development and sale of a project that fits the customer. Sometimes it won't fit the customer. Sometimes there's a different product that fits the customer. And does the integrator drive it? Yeah, but the integrator's not a manufacturer. The integrator doesn't have that kind of money to spool up because they got to be out there working. So, I view.
What about the owner? What about the tech owner?
The client.
Right? Yeah, the client. So there's only one manufacturer that has a closed API. Every other AV manufacturer has some kind of API where you could talk to all of their devices. So if you are a technology owner, this is what confuses me a bit. Why would you choose to be beholden to one proprietary ecosystem instead of, being able to have choice moving in the future? So having your user interface and control logic done in standardized open source programming languages, and then you're able to pick and choose whatever endpoints, displays, DSPs, whatever it is, as needed.
There's a difference, though, between saying standardized open source languages and a standardized solution, though, isn't there? I mean,
Well, there is no solution. Everybody does their own thing. And
no, but there is. If you take a proprietary solution, then the way my touch panel talks to my control processor, I don't have to worry about that. That's handled by that ecosystem.
TCP.
Well, right, but you don't want to rewrite your TCP connection every time you put a new piece of kit in, do you? I don't want to. To be honest,
you could modularize that.
Yeah, but as a solution provider, I don't want to have to worry about that's like getting way too down low into the OS, I guess. I think.
But you still
work at a much higher level.
Still pull that symbol over, right? It would, once you write that module once, it's done, and you could reuse it again.
Yeah, but I have to write that module for every different piece of equipment that I want to put into my solution.
You also have to remember, if you're basing it based on your technical acumen, and again, we're software developers. There's a big difference between a software developer and somebody who's deploying software and trying to get in, get out. And I'll say it over and over again: get in, get out, get paid. Can you do it?
Right.
It's like, again, there's the instances of.
But Rich, how does that square with what we're talking about now? Because this won't be easy. No, you won't be able to do HTML quickly
yet. And again, I'm one of the biggest ones who will bang my shoe on the table saying
I'll say never.
When more,
it's never going to happen.
I think it'll evolve. We're here, aren't we? And we want to be over there. Somebody's going to fill the bit in the middle at some point.
And we said that with AV over IP and video over IP. Is it easier now than it was 5 years ago? Yes. Was it ridiculously hard 5 years ago? Yeah, there was only a handful of guys that could do it. Are you at the point now where the technology, without people needing to know how the sausage is made, can go out and deploy a solution that is provided for them in a closed ecosystem? Could you? Absolutely. Could you make your own?
You guys have been doing the same thing for too long, and you're a little bit biased, to be honest. I really do, because restaurant programming is not easy.
Oh, now
there was a learning curve. There was an investment, many years at this point, right?
Yeah. Since I foresee this being a much longer conversation, and my time is running short on this company, I will be glad to continue this in a future discussion. But I'm going to have to wrap it up for today. I do feel like this is a great conversation to have, and I appreciate, it's always good to be able to sit back and hear some good banter and dialogue, and I think that the audience appreciates that as well. So thank you guys for being a part of that. First, Patrick Murray from Catch Connect, how can people get in touch with you, learn what you're up to, and continue the conversation?
I have a favor to ask of all the listeners. So with this HTML stuff coming out and my background in doing the online courses at learnavprogramming.com, I'd like to know if there's any interest in an HTML course. So if you want to help me figure that out, go to learnavprogramming.com/HTML, and there's a quick little survey. And if the result is positive, then we'll make a course to help AV programmers figure this stuff out.
Cool.
So learnavprogramming.com/HTML.
That's all you, any ways to get in touch with you directly?
LinkedIn, over the website, there's a contact form as well.
Excellent. Thanks. Thank you, Oliver. It's great again to have met you in person, and I appreciate you being part of this conversation. How can people get in touch with you and learn more about automation?
Sorry. The website's www.automation.com. I'm on Twitter which is @automation, or @automationtech if you want to subscribe to the juicy, exciting stuff when we're developing things. LinkedIn again, all the usual stuff.
Thank you. And last but not least, Rich, how can people get in touch with you? And another great show as we have had in the past, and how can we continue the conversation?
Well, I love this conversation. And first, before I talk about myself, I do want to say about these two. Not only are they my friends, but I'm fans. I'm a fan of the work they do. Ollie won't talk about it, but we were just talking about tools and flattening the curve on things. No pun intended. Sorry for using that. I use the tools that Oliver generated to make things easier for programming. Patrick has an incredible online programming school basically that he's generated, and so this is exactly what we're talking about. When you don't know how to get from here to there, both of them are coming in from two totally different directions, and both are equally valid. If you want to maximize the tools that you're already using and you're bought in to your ecosystem, make use of the tools that a company like Oliver has in modules and all of these great things. Again, I can, glowing reviews. I am biased in that respect, but that's because it makes me money.
That's the idea.
Money. And then with Patrick's stuff, I learned a lot. It was able to expand my viewpoint on how I was handling the programming and learning about programming that I didn't know. That I'm kind of at the point where I'm like, am I too old to even want to do this? And so as I'm bringing people in, I can accelerate their learning curve. And so, taking everything out of this more than anything else, apart from myself, is really, I want to say I'm so glad you two are on the show, because you both bring equally valid viewpoints from completely opposite directions, but they both work. And that's the best part. So with that said, if you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at rfregosa. You can find me on the interwebs, fregosadesign.com. More importantly, I would love if you were going to support me, to support AVNation and our suite of shows. Obviously here, State of Control with my good friend. We have Resi Week, AV Week, all of the other shows that are out there. Support us, support our sponsors. Click and find your way to avnation.tv. That's the best way to find me.
Good deal. And I will second what you said, because I know that I have admired a lot of Ollie's stuff, and I've also had some of my team members take Patrick's classes, and all have gotten some great reviews. So, to give Rich a plug, make sure you check him out on Resi Week. He's been on recently, and it's always a good conversation. So while you're at the website at avnation.tv, please take a moment to visit the supporters of the show, to tell them that you appreciate their support and help and their help on making this and other shows possible. For me, Steve Greenblatt, please check out my company website at controlconcepts.net, or you can find me on social media at Steve Greenblatt. I was also involved in a very successful Learn From Home Summit that AVNation did recently, and I highly recommend everybody catching those recordings, and there's very good content and some great learning opportunities there. Also, Rich and I would like to hear from you. Please reach out. We want to be able to make sure that this show is filling your need and your curiosities. So if you can give us a review, send us a comment, let us know what you want to hear, or even if you want to be part of the show in the future, we'd like to hear from you. So reach out to us or visit avnation.tv for more information. Otherwise, that'll be it for today on State of Control.